And we're back. Welcome back, everybody. So I had that last segment there talking about my first very odd encounter with one of my '90s heroes, Smashing Pumpkins, and I think from there, as I mentioned, it'd be a good place to jump into the plethora of other '90s related concert stories I have because I have had the good fortune of seeing all the basically all the bands that when people ask me to list my like top 5, top 10 favorite bands, I could probably rattle off those bands because musically I'm tragically stuck in the '90s, and only recently have I managed to kind of break that mold. But a lot of these concerts for me were some of the like defining moments of my musical um my concert career, for lack of a better term. Not that I'm the one performing, but just the span of all the concerts I've seen. And probably the first biggest one before it proceeded to get upstaged by another concert I'll talk about in a few minutes was seeing the Foo Fighters at Citi Field. I forget what year this was. This might have been 2016, I think 2015, 2016, something like that. But this was just around the time where I was getting back into or not back into music, but really into music for the first time. And Foo Fighters were the band that I really first latched onto um, as a kid before I discovered Oasis and before I kind of expanded off of Oasis into my whole nexus, my whole universe of everything I'm into now. Foo Fighters were the first one because my dad would always play them, and you know, in terms of rock bands, I think they're one of the very few rock bands that can manage to be just that, a rock band. Heavy sound, heavy hitting. Dave Grohl's got a magnetic rock star personality, but they're kind of difficult to dislike. I've haven't really met that many people who actively dislike the Foo Fighters, and I think compared to a lot of other bands of that genre, they're one of the easier ones to get into. So I was around 15, 16, just worshiping at the altar of Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters, and they were going on this huge stadium tour, and they were coming to Citi Field, and so my dad, my dad, my sister, and I, and just about every person we know in our town where we live decided that this had to be like the event of the summer. Everybody had to go see Foo Fighters at Citi Field. It was going to be the concert to end all concert and the tailgate to end all tailgates. And once we had the news that Dave Grohl was in fact going to continue with this tour with the Foo Fighters after he had broken his leg earlier in the tour in Europe when he fell off the stage, and then in a drugged up daze came up with the idea for his throne of guitars, upon which he performed for the remainder of the show. That was it. We were going. So the entire day started with a party bus coming to pick up about at least 30 people who all came at our house as a rendezvous point in that morning. Everybody had food and snacks and drinks, just lugging them. We took the bus through Queens all the way to the Unisphere because the concert was at Citi Field. So we just set up shop around the Unisphere, staked off our whole area. There were food trucks, so many people there, and it was nothing I had ever really seen before, because up until that point, my concert exposure had just been pretty much what I just laid out in the last segment, just a few smaller venues for bands like Fall Out Boy and Smashing Pumpkins, who I liked plenty, but they didn't mean nearly as much to me as the Foo Fighters had come to mean to me at this point in my life. And so that tailgate it was almost as fun as a concert to me, because my sister was there and my cousins were there, and we just kind of took over. We walked around talking about all our favorite Foo Fighter songs, what we were excited to see. And then the show itself, we probably we left well before all of our parents from the Unisphere to go to Citi Field, but managed to get there after them because we took the most random roundabout back roads way. We were walking like behind like municipal buildings for the tennis center across the street from Citi Field. I don't know how we didn't get stopped or how we didn't get lost, but we found our way. We got to our seats, and it was really just unreal for me. I sang along to every song. I was moving around so much that the random stranger sitting next to us kind of had to elbow me back into my seat a few times because I was dancing too hard and jumping over into their seats a little bit. And as much as I wouldn't wish a broken leg onto Dave Grohl, retrospectively or currently, I kind of think it's cool that we got to see him on the tour where he had the guitar thrown, because hopefully for his personal well-being, we won't have to see that again. But it was kind of special watching him just slide up and down on the throne's track built into the stage. And you'd think it might take away from some of the Foo Fighters show because so much of Dave Grohl's energy is just he comes out on stage, he runs left and right, and people just lose their minds looking at him as he's hitting his guitar over and over again. But he's just got that it factor, I think, that not many people have, where he could just be sitting in a chair looking out to the crowd and send them into a frenzy. And so the show was amazing. They had just released their album Sonic Highways, which there was a HBO documentary series for as well that was really great. So they played some new songs from that, played all their great classics that just sent me over the edge into ecstasy when I heard songs like Breakout and Monkey Wrench and All My Life and stuff like that. And by the night's end, I had officially decided that at that time in my life, they were my favorite band. And that was like the best show I would ever see, except it wasn't. Because about a year, 2 years later, in early 2017, I saw Green Day at Barclays Center. And that was at the time and is to this day the best concert that I've ever been to. They had just released Revolution Radio, their 2016, late 2016 album. That was just the ultimate Green Day revival. They had kind of fallen on hard times with their less well-received Uno Dos Tre, more like pop rocky trilogy that not a lot of people liked. It seemed like they were slipping away into the obscurity that unfortunately comes up and claims so many bands that had seemed to have had their heyday in the 90s and early 2000s. But and I believe Billy Joe Armstrong, Green Day's frontman, was also on hard times himself around that time, back on alcohol and drugs and everything that had plagued him for most of his musical career. But with Revolution Radio, they really just got back on the wagon in every sense of the term, and they just created this amazing pure Green Day sound that shot them back into just the spotlight for me and for, I assume, the world of rock music. Because at the time I was like, oh yeah, Green Day, they have like American Idiot, they have Dookie, they have some fun songs, and that was my extent of liking them. But after that came out, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Now I got to go see what else like I used to like about them so much. And I think it's pretty safe to say that Revolution Radio, that album, is really the reason why when I realized just how big a Green Day fan I was. And that concert was just spectacular. Green Day, just like I was talking about Dave Grohl, they just have a presence. Billy Joe Armstrong just kind of can put a crowd into the palm of his hand and get them to do whatever he wants and send them into a frenzy. Musically extremely tight, extremely underrated in terms of musicianship. I think Mike Dirnt is a fantastic bassist and Trey Cool is a fantastic drummer. And I vividly remember having to strain my voice about as hard as I ever have towards the last two songs, American Idiot and Jesus of Suburbia, because they closed with those two songs, and I had spent the entire concert beforehand belting out every lyric to every song, and my voice was just completely shot. And then, funnily enough, my AP US history teacher at the time, because I was a high school junior when I went to go see this concert, he went to go see a concert with his friend too, and I knew he was going to be there, so I was joking with him in class and joking with my friends, oh, I'm going to run into Mr. Simone at this concert. And as fate would have it, me and my dad and everybody else who went to the show walked into the same bar to have a meal before this concert, and him and his friend were sitting at the table, just like 3-4 tables over from us, having a meal, and I just couldn't believe it. So I went up, said hi, my dad introduced himself. It was just, it would be the story I told all my friends in school after the show more than they actually cared about the show. They would want to hear, oh, you see Mr. Simone? And I could be like, actually, I did. And everyone loved it. And then I saw him the next morning. He's my first class of the day. He like peeks his head out the door, sees me coming, and I just hold up my Green Day t-shirt that I had gotten the day before. It was just incredible. Best concert I've ever been to. I'm waiting to see if anybody can upstage it, including Green Day themselves, because they just recently got back into the new music scene. They released a new single called Father of All. Kind of new sound for Green Day, but you should definitely check it out and have a similar experience to what I just did. So those were kind of the two life-defining 90s concerts for me. I have had a few ones that aren't necessarily as like awe-inspiring for me, but still pretty great. Venue, honestly, more than anything for some of the other shows was what made it. I went to see Third Eye Blind at the Jones Beach Amphitheater, and Third Eye Blind, definitely a lesser 90s band or current band than Foo Fighters or Green Day, but for me personally, their debut album from 97, it was self-titled, just is one of the most important albums to me, one of my favorite albums of all time. Just such a simultaneously very unique and perfectly 90s sound that just kind of encapsulates everything that I could rant on about forever about the decade to you over the show, which I'm almost finding myself doing right now. But very good album. You definitely, if you're not sure if you're familiar with it, know some songs. How's It Gonna Be, Semi Charmed Life, Graduate, are just chock full of hits. And Jones Beach Amphitheater, for those of you that don't know, is a venue literally on the water of Jones Beach on Long Island. When you're higher up in the amphitheater, you can look out, you can see the water, you can see out to the beach. And I have, by the grace of Mother Nature, never been to a show there where the weather wasn't just absolutely spectacular. And on this night, I think might have been my first show at Jones Beach. This was no exception. And we had access to the VIP parking lot, to the VIP section of the amphitheater itself. And that made for a great show because we could just kind of kick back, relax, and comfort and watch Third Eye Blind put on a great show. Because as I mentioned, their first album is one of my favorites of all time. The reason they were on tour was because it was the 25th or 20th anniversary of this album. So they played it top to bottom. So that was just another musically magical experience for me. But something that I've never really seen at a concert before happened beforehand. The opening band was Silver Sun Pickups. They're a more modern day indie rock band, kind of akin to if Smashing Pumpkins was a bit more modern. Definitely a good band if you're interested in them. But they opened for them, and I only kind of knew them a little bit through my cousin who would introduce them to me. But I was really excited to see them too, just to have that experience under my belt. And before Third Eye Blind came on, while they were going on, there was this one person by himself in front of the stage, or not, no, like in the standing area, a little bit away from the stage, so he had room to himself, just losing his mind to Silver Sun Pickups. He knew every song. He was like moshing. It was a one-man mosh pit, just long hair in his face, flying everywhere, jumping up and down. He probably did like a backflip at one point. I wouldn't be surprised if that had actually happened. Just going crazy like I've never seen at a show before or since I've been to that concert. And after a song, the Silver Sun Pickups frontman acknowledged him as like, "Oh, you must be like our biggest fan of all time. You got to come on stage and join us." And so this guy gets helped onto stage, and they perform a song, and he just continues doing what he's doing, just rocking out and having the time of his life on stage with the band. Thankfully, he didn't accidentally like spinning heel kick one of the band members and ruin the songs in his dancing frenzy. But it was just so cool to see that clearly Silver Sun Pickups meant so much to this guy, and he was just having the time of his life, and he get to have that experience where they bring him up on stage and he can say he's done that. And he was so gracious about it, didn't try to overstay his welcome, was so thankful to the band afterward. And that was just really cool for me to see. And if I ever build up the self-confidence to just mosh like a lunatic in front of one of my favorite bands and they call me up on stage, maybe I'll have a similar experience that he did. But until and unless, I'll just watch other people do that. All right, we're going to take another quick break. When I come back, I'm just going to talk about a little more recent fun concert stories that I've been to in the past year or two. Going to get away from the 90s stuff, but not entirely because you never really can with me. And I'll see you guys in a few minutes.